How's it going, guys? Sabi from Mars 1000. Today is July 6, 2020, and we're going to take a look at currently Invest 98L, which is currently over Georgia at this point, and it's bringing a lot of thunderstorm activity to this area, and it has a chance of developing into a tropical storm. And your questions might be, what are the chances of this developing into a tropical storm or potentially something even stronger? We'll take a look at that right now and answer that question right now. So first, to determine that answer, we first need to look at the water vapor imagery as of right now all across the Atlantic. And you can see that there's a lot of thunderstorm activity towards the southeast, and we do see strong wind shear through this area, evident by how fast these clouds and the water vapor is moving towards the east. And we see a lot of thunderstorms sort of drifting off to the north, which represents that there's stronger wind shear through this area. And there certainly is, as there's a jet stream currently dipping over the northeast that's bringing thunderstorm activity to this area. And we have the low pressure system, which could become a tropical storm as it gets closer to the Carolinas and off the east coast, as it encounters an area where there's going to be less wind shear and potentially not enough dry air to hinder this from developing, which may allow it to develop into something more than just a tropical disturbance as of right now. And based off of what we see, there's a ridge currently over Illinois, and that's currently giving this disturbance an outflow channel to let a lot of the latent heat that's currently aloft to sink down towards this region, which is not good news because that could strengthen it in the future, especially as it moves more and more towards the east. And we do have a little bit of an upper level low in the Gulf of Mexico, but it isn't bringing enough wind shear to slow this down. And overall, yeah, we're seeing a lot of thunderstorm activity associated with this low over the southeast, and that could develop later. If we take a closer look, right now there definitely is thunderstorm activity. However, it's obviously disorganized. You can't really see any sort of rotation with this low pressure system, as it's mainly just a lot of these thunderstorms are mainly just sprawled out, disorganized. However, they do exist and they are developing, which shows that there's more than just that is somewhat of a capable system that could develop if it's over open waters and it's under a conducive area where wind shear is light. The question, but however, one thing that's for certain, whether this develops or not into a tropical storm or tropical depression, is that we're going to see a lot of rain from this, especially throughout the Carolinas, where we could see localized amounts of up to 4 to 5 inches, especially very close to the coast. And even if we go a little bit more inland, 1 to 2 inches of rain are certainly possible through the inland portions of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And by the way, this is over the next 5 days. So, but even then, the rainfall amounts through the next 5 days will amount to quite a lot when it's all said and done, most likely. And whether this develops or not, the thing that's gonna be that's certain is that we're gonna see a lot of rain throughout the southeast, and that could potentially extend off over to the northeast coast. As of right now, we're currently mainly seeing an area of 1 to 2 inches over New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the tri-state area of New York. However, if this storm moves just slightly more to the east than expected, we could see that rain that's currently pretty much meandering over the Gulf Stream, those rainfall amounts of up to 5 inches, move into the coast of the northeast, and that would be extremely worrying for that area, since it isn't typical you see over a lot of rain over 2 inches in one event in the northeast. So potentially having a rainfall event over this area would definitely be a major worry, especially in these areas. So let's move on to the GFS model, see if this could develop into a tropical storm or tropical depression in the future. And I think the thing that we're gonna keep track of is the wind shear, because that's gonna be key over the next several days. And unfortunately, the GFS isn't expecting a lot of wind shear to really hinder this. I think the only thing that's gonna hinder this from potentially developing into anything more than a tropical storm is land, because as of right now, most of the computer models are leaning towards this low pressure system to pretty much hug the coast and be over land most of the time, which I think is probably one of the only things that would hinder it from developing. And it's also good to point out that there's still a little bit of Saharan desert air over this area, and that could hinder it at the same also. But I think the main factor whether this develops or not is if this is how far inland will this low pressure be, because if it's a little bit further out to sea, then we could see a storm develop a little bit more. However, if it's a little bit more over land, we might not see it develop. However, that will increase the chance of rain all throughout the coast. So either way, it's pretty bad, because we don't want to see this develop and we don't want to see a lot of rain along the coast. However, if it were up to me, I would rather have this storm develop, however, stay out to sea, since most of the coast will not get the full force of the rainfall if this is offshore. However, currently the GFS and European are unfortunately taking a track that's more inland towards the coast, which could enhance the rainfall potential along the coast. So this, as of right now, the low pressure is currently right here, and it's dealing with a small amount of wind shear currently as a result of this jet stream dip that's just to the east of it, and that's bringing a little bit of strong upper level winds through this region. However, it isn't a ton to where it'll completely break this system apart and make the thunderstorms completely drift off to the east just yet. And you might expect that as the storm continues to move more and more to the east, you would expect that this will go out to sea and be no problem. However, that's not the case, because it seems like this storm is going to move very slowly towards the east, because if we move on to Tuesday, it's still over primarily the Georgia area at this point. And I think the reason why it's going to move slower is because there's this ridge of high pressure currently over the Great Lakes region, and it's kind of slowing this down, because on the south side of every ridge in the northern hemisphere, the winds move the winds move from east to west. So as the storm is trying to pretty much check its go towards the east, there's this high pressure that's gonna slow it down and try to bring it towards the west. It won't be enough to completely steer it to the west. However, it will be enough to slow it down. So it's unlikely that this will just drift out to sea, as most of the computer models at this point are agreeing that this low pressure system will move along the coast and potentially strengthen and bring rain, and definitely bring heavy rain throughout the East Coast, and especially the Carolinas and Georgia at this point, which is definitely the most likely at this point. It's still uncertain as we go more north, because any slight differences in the forecast could mean the difference between 5 inches of rain along the East Coast or less than 1 inch of rain, which is a huge gap in terms of rainfall. We just have to see where this low pressure where this low pressure system goes over the next several days. However, the GFS however, it seems like the storm is moving too slow to really get drifted out by the wind shear, and then by the time it reaches the coast, this ridge is going to build over the western Atlantic, and that'll force it up north instead of going along with the wind shear and blowing off to the east, which is definitely not good news. And as you can see, as it continues to move more and more toward the east, you see a little bit of a ridge beginning to build, and it's gonna divert the winds from mainly going from west to east to more of a southward to northward track, which will bring the storm up northward and onto more land and just hugging the East Coast. And if we continue on with the forecast, the GFS does not really strengthen it, as it's so weak that the GFS doesn't even list it as a low pressure system to worry about, because it's so weak, as GFS is currently taking more of an inland track. However, that will increase the rainfall. I want to emphasize that very clearly, because just because this doesn't develop does not mean that you will be spared in terms of rainfall impacts along the East Coast. And in fact, if this doesn't develop, it's more likely to be over land and bring more rainfall, which would definitely not be good news at all for the East Coast. So if we take a look, wait, let me let me switch to the precipitation map, because I want to show you guys the potential rainfall that could happen if this storm moves along the coast, which the GFS is currently expecting at this point. Just one second. So let me pull up the rainfall forecast at this point for Invest 98L, and let me move it back a little bit. So this, as of right now, obviously it's fairly accurate. We're seeing a lot of thunderstorms throughout the southeast, and if we continue to move forward, it begins to develop little by little as it encounters an area where there isn't going to be a lot of wind shear, as the GFS model is suggesting, and it's gonna get a lot of its rain and energy from the Gulf Stream, and will be just off the coast enough to where it'll tap into that warm filled Gulf Stream with a ton of latent heat to allow rapid evaporation to occur surrounding this invest, which may be tropical depression by the time it hits Carolinas. And as it continues to move off north, we see a band definitely begin to develop on the eastern side of this storm, and the GFS is currently taking that to impact the East Coast and bring a lot of rain over this area. And it might be enhanced by the fact that we're going to see a dip in the jet stream, which could enhance thunderstorm activity in this region, and as a result, enhance flash flooding threat or flooding threat in general. So that's definitely not good news at this point. If we take a look at the European, see what it's saying, if the European is also currently taking the same sort of track a little bit further to the east. However, it's still close enough along the coast where we're likely to see a pretty heavy rainfall event throughout the East Coast, and that's definitely not good news. There's still a lot of questions to the track of this, and it really all depends on how quick that high pressure from the GFS forms along the western Atlantic, because if it forms a little bit later than expected, then it's more likely to stay off coast, and most of the East Coast will miss out on the heaviest rainfall from this. However, we'll still likely get 1-2 inches of rain along the coast. However, if the ridge builds a little bit quicker than expected, then we're more likely to see a land the storm move inland, and while it won't develop at that point, it will bring a lot of rain throughout the East Coast. So we're definitely going to need to keep that in mind. And also, we have to determine whether this ridge that's going to build over the western Atlantic that's supposed to steer this up north, if it's going to be stronger, if it's going to be weaker, because if it's weaker, we're more likely to see this steer more towards the east. However, if it's stronger, we're more likely to see this steer more toward closer to the East Coast and probably inland for most of the time. So this is definitely something to watch along the East Coast, as there definitely could be something a pretty big rain threat along the East Coast. So if you take a look at the wind shear map, as you can see, there's fairly light wind shear over the southeast and little to no wind shear over Florida at this point. And this wind shear isn't really strong enough to drift these storms apart, like I said. And then if we move to the future, it becomes more and more conducive for tropical cyclone development. And as this jet stream continues to move more and more towards the east, we're gonna see that ridge build over the western Atlantic, and that should limit a lot of the wind shear that it would otherwise deal with if that jet stream was over this area. So this is definitely something to watch over the next several days. However, in terms of the rainfall forecast as of right now, let me this as right now. However, if this moves more and more towards the west, we could see that rain move towards the east coast, which wouldn't be good. And but however, I could be certain that we're going to see a heavy rainfall throughout the Carolinas and Georgia at this point. In terms of the forecasted strength and track forecast, you see that this is the GFS ensemble right now, the spaghetti models, and the average currently is bringing this storm mainly to stay inland. However, the GFS is predicting this 5 days out by the time it reaches the mid-Atlantic area like Long Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. So this could easily change. We've seen storms 3 days forecasted 3 days beyond completely shift tracks from by the time we get closer. So this could easily change, and it might vary from moving from the east or the west over the next several days. So we need to keep in mind of the track forecast, because it could determine the strength and the impact this will have along the east coast. And in terms of the strength forecast, the darker blues represent over 30 mile winds, and if we convert that to miles per hour, that's around 35 miles per hour, which is around tropical depression strength. And no storm really is believing that this will develop into a tropical storm, because like I said, I think the dry air is definitely gonna hurt the chances of this really developing. And also, as this moves up north, we're gonna see a trough dip through the Great Lakes region, and that might be enough wind shear to prevent this from developing into anything more than a tropical storm. So my point is, for Invest 98L for along the coast of the Carolinas, definitely prepare for a heavy rain threat. And if you're in areas prone to flooding, make sure to prepare for that right now in those areas, because it's pretty certain we're going to see a heavy rain threat throughout this area. And as for the east coast, it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because we could see a flooding threat in that area, and we could see potentially a tropical storm develop and maybe make landfall along the east coast, along northeast, which is very rare for any time of the year, since we don't usually see tropical storms or tropical cyclones in general make landfall in the northeast anytime during the season. So definitely something to at least keep an eye on. And if you're in flood prone areas, definitely keep close eye on this and prepare now. It's better to be safe than sorry in those flood prone areas. However, outside of Invest 98L, we have Tropical Storm Eduoard, which is now post-tropical cyclone Eduoard, as it was starting to entrain more and more cold air to the point where it wasn't really developing fully in a fully tropical way anymore. And it's currently has maximum sustained winds of 45 miles per hour, and it's moving extremely fast to the northeast at 38 miles per hour. And the only reason why this is really as strong as it is at 45 miles per hour is how fast it is moving. The westerlies are definitely enhancing a lot of the winds, especially towards the southern side of this hurricane, where the winds usually move from west to east. So that's definitely keeping the storm somewhat relevant and alive. However, it isn't going to do anything, as it's going to move over the open ocean and lose a lot of its strength as it loses contact with the warmer Gulf Stream water. So nothing to worry about with Eduoard. And then in terms of anything else to worry about, we do have this disturbance, which currently has a low chance of developing, and the main reason why is because there's just going to be too much dry air over this region. You see those darker the darker black colors, which represent drier air, and that's definitely going to hinder this from having any major chance of developing. So at this point, chances are slim. However, it's still good to point out, especially around the Caribbean, because there is still a chance, even though it's very, very slim. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more content, and I hope you guys have a good day, and make sure to share with friends and family as well. And prepare now if you're along the East Coast, because flooding is definitely very dangerous, and do not underestimate this. But anyways, guys, have